If revolutionary socialist principles were generally popular right now, we would have a revolutionary socialist party that has or some kind of like political machination that we could use to apply pressure to the government. It reminds me of that meme, right? But it's not really a meme at all. Let's continue.
But recent months in this country have enormously inspired me.
If there's a 15 or 16 and they've been bouncing around the political compass for life.
Let's hear what Brace Belden had to say about LARP and destroying the U.S. government. This part of the conversation is about reform versus revolution. I'm going to be on Josh Citarella's podcast as well. Doom Scroll is the name of his podcast. Here is friend of the show, Brace Belden, a.k.a. Pispik Granddad.
And the socialism was not capital S socialism. It was more like social democracy.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, this actually exists in Denmark. We should...
Edgelordology, it's good to know how to lie as the left. It's okay to do leftist propaganda, a.k.a. lying. Yeah, that's what I was saying, dumb fuck. Dude, I have no issues with my positions, okay? When people go, hey, do you believe in a dictatorship of the proletariat? I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, absolutely not. Oh, no, that would be lying, okay? That would be fucking lying. I'm not saying shelter your perspective. I'm saying literally narrate. If you're a communicator, narrate to the crowd that you're speaking to. I'm not being ironic. No, I know. You're being stupid. You're not being ironic. You're being a dumbass. I'm such a soybean. I have no emotion. That's why I must support the Democratic Party. It's good to know how to lie as the left. I know. Until you find a more appropriate and more successful method of building a Marxist-Leninist vanguard party, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, okay? And you do you. If you build it, I'll be there by your side. You understand?
Should try it here. And a lot of people were amenable to that. And it wasn't really the kind of 20th century romantic revolutionary struggle that we associate with capital S socialism.
No, not at all. I think that caused a great deal of confusion. And it's this sort of like reproduction of like what like people seeing like memes or like, you know, like an article they like, and kind of like reproducing some of the narrative of that without any of the actual like meat behind it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And which I don't blame people for. Like, not everyone has to be like crazy politically involved or anything like that. But I think there was a great confusion of definitions, and that obviously still persists to this day.
By the way, there's perhaps no better indication of how cooked the Western left is, especially than someone like myself, one of the largest communicators of leftist positions, socialist positions in North America, in the Northern Hemisphere in general, telling his audience, hey, I have a lot of experience in the field of communication, and I'm telling you through that experience that being normal and you know, messaging in a way that is more appealing to as broad of an audience as possible is perhaps the best thing you can do. And chatters are like, yo, I'm not going to be normal. That's it. That's the problem. Not the Northern Hemisphere, but the Western world, let's say.
Day. And I'm not somebody out here like, you know, who goes like, you're not a real socialist. You know, I don't care, you know? But I think like just objectively stepping back, that led to a great deal of confusion. And all these contradictions that would have happened regardless just became really almost impossible to resolve in some cases.
One of the things that is peculiar about that word, socialism, people would say it about Bernie Sanders. They'll also say it about Joe Biden. They'll say it about Kamala Harris. They'll say it about J.D. Vance, right? They'll say it about anyone who talks about economic redistribution. And it kind of seems like, okay, this is a strategic decision for the left. They're going to call us socialist anyway. If we just talk about increasing the corporate tax rate, for example, they're going to call us socialists. If we want to be that, maybe we should just get out ahead of it and call ourselves socialists. Do you think that's a strategic advantage, or is that a mistake?
Well, look at how history played out. Yes, in some cases. No, in many others. You know, like at the end of the day, like socialism, even in its like whatever debased form of like Bernie Sanders sort of you know, tax shit or whatever, is still like, it's still verboten to a lot of Americans.
Right.
And that line of attack still works to some degree.
The word is verboten.
Yeah, exactly.
But the policies might be popular.
Social democratic policies might be popular. I think genuinely, and it gives me no joy to admit this, but like I think like genuinely like revolutionary socialist policies in America are deeply unpopular.
Yes.
I think a lot of people delude themselves into thinking they are popular, and like there's this great mass of people who we just need to be activated by us or whatever. It's the same people, like the way that politicians think about like independent voters or like non-voters. Like they actually all agree with us. We just need to talk to them.
Yeah.
And the fact is that like most people don't agree with even basic socialist principles and policies, even like very much reformist, non-revolutionary, anti-revolutionary socialist policies. But it's very difficult to like actually have to convince people to support those policies, and so people just assume that they either believe it and that we're being prevented from talking to them, or whatever other excuse.
If you look at these Nordic countries, I don't think that you or I would call them socialism. We'd call them that they have economies that are more socialized than privatized.
Yeah.
We'd call it maybe actually existing social democracy or something like that. But my sense is that those programs are kind of appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think that people could get behind like a social democratic president or whatever, or policies. And we saw that with like Bernie Sanders. Like he was massively popular
With a lot of the undecided or independent voters.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. But it just didn't happen.
It didn't work.
It didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah.
The big difference is like those Nordic countries, really every other Western European country, every other country basically, has like a pretty like strong history of, I think just due to the nature of parliamentary democracy, a social democratic party having some amount of power and being able to govern in some sense.
Maybe 50 years of uninterrupted power in the case of Sweden.
Exactly.
That's a lot of institutional power.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like, in France or Germany, any of these places.
Sure.
It's not a foreign thing to them. But for us, it's just by the many integers of history, it's just not the case here.
I think you're a great stepping stone into leftist internet. Been waiting for my moment. That's literally when my lying. Why do you see it as a bad thing? Because lying is bad. It's different than even propaganda. Propaganda is seen as a negative. There's a negative connotation associated with propaganda, even though propaganda is just, messaging, telling your side. It can be something like marketing, or it can be all the way to lying, doing propaganda, propaganda for a title state like Israel. That's the reason. Lying is just bad all the time. Lying is always bad. Okay? Anyway. I think you're a great stepping stone in the leftist internet because of how normal you present yourself. I myself used to be really right-wing, both economically and socially. Looking back, I was literally racist, even if I didn't see it. And slowly, by watching your streams, my views have radically changed over a couple months. You're a great dude. You're a great dude. Keep being normal. Thank you. And I'm gonna keep doing that. It's not an accident. Your experiences in how to succeed in a capitalist liberal media. You have no expertise in how to foment true political change. And I don't trust you more than I do Lenin or Rosa or actual principled revolutionaries and theorists. None of these people have espoused your philosophy here. What? Dude, the revolutionary fervor and the idealism at the time and the material conditions that were so perfect for like the assembly line was so perfectly designed for labor organizing and creating real existing socialism is not comparable. Living in the fucking imperial core after the ashes of the USSR, like 30 years, 40 years after the USSR was dissolved and America won the Cold War. What the fuck are you talking about? Jesus Christ. It's important to read both Luxemburg and Lenin and develop a better historical understanding of how these things happen, how to foment real political change. But the major issue with like a lot of orthodox Marxists, for example, is that they just try to apply exactly that without adjusting it to the current existing material conditions in a place like the United States of America. This is why I also will be, very forgiving in my commentary when it comes to China. You can't be dogmatic in your approach to building socialism, okay? I think that's the chatter that was yelling you to go on Bad Empanada stream, probably. I think the very best thing that an out and about outspoken socialist could do in the United States of America is to gain as much momentum as possible and to instill class consciousness, because that's the biggest point of weakness for the American working class, is that they are completely and utterly devoid of class consciousness. Once that happens, also through entryism, using the platforms that are readily available to you, using the opportunities that are readily available to you, you can try and rebuild a mechanism of pushback in the form of labor unions in this country, and then convince those labor unions to also engage in more labor militancy, and potentially maybe one day, many years into the many decades in the future, there could be some serious changes that take place. Having said that, however, if that can't even happen, then the best possible thing you can do in the interim is to try to get America out of the way, to allow other places with real revolutionary potential to thrive. In any case, people even look at like marginal reforms in the direction of a robust social democracy as like unacceptable radical positions that threaten the way of existence. I'm just trying to do my best, is what I mean.
This is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I think there's two ways of thinking about this on the left, where some people will think that we need to create the conditions for revolution, which means if things get worse for workers, they are more likely to revolt. And there's an alternative way of thinking, which is that when the workers are empowered and they have good organization, they have good wages, then they can make more and more bold demands. And that's a pretty important divergence, right? Because that strategically, you start to make different decisions from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, given that labor unions, at least in modern society, oftentimes come from work environments that have better workplace conditions as opposed to the really dog shit work conditions, I think no. When your bosses are kinder, you are more likely to be able to build a labor union more successfully. And therefore, when you have a labor union, I'm of the mindset that like you can make even more aggressive demands. That's what I believe. Not the other way around, allowing material conditions to deteriorate and destroy itself due to the inherent contradictions baked into capitalism. Because the notion that you will magically create a vanguard party through the ashes of the deterioration of capitalism is silly. All you will accelerate towards without actual education, workers' education, without actual direction, is fascism. That's where we're heading down right now.
I know we're both fans of the Vincent Bevins book, If We Burn, the Age of Mass Protests and the Missing Revolution.
Insane
the title,
that you're doing after the colon shit there. The subtitle.
I mean, I've cared so much about, this has really been my field of study for like the past 10 years, is like looking at social media as a form of social organization. That is, you know, there are rules of governance, there's identity in these systems, there's exchanges of currency. Like this is a new way of organizing human society. And there were utopian visions attached to that. You know, that people said, oh, this is going to be peer-to-peer, even better than communism, more egalitarian, whatever. It's a totally new way of organizing society. A lot of that stuff, it won't surprise you at all, did not pan out.
No.
In the Vincent Bevins book, it seems to me like he kind of resolves at the end of it that Brazilian social democracy under Lula is a very positive development.
Yeah.
He sounds quite revolutionary in other contexts internationally, but in the case of Brazil, he seems rather amenable to social democracy. Do you feel like those divergent choices, that workers becoming more precaritized makes them more likely to revolt, is that a better strategy, or workers becoming emboldened, having higher wages, better organization, that social democracy incrementally leads?
What do you think about him saying socialist policies are generally unpopular? No, he said revolutionary socialist principles are generally unpopular. We like to imagine that they are, but they're not. And he's not wrong, especially in America. Are you kidding me? If revolutionary socialist principles were generally popular right now, we would have a revolutionary socialist party that has or some kind of like political machination that we could use to apply pressure to the government. It reminds me of that meme, right? But it's not really a meme at all. It reminds me of the mass protests that communists engaged in the buildup to the New Deal. Okay, like there was a tremendous amount of out and about socialist, trade unionists, communists alike that were pressuring for change. They were out in the streets waving the fucking communist banners. Now, is there some truth to the fact that the expansion of the welfare state led to the inevitable demise of a socialist revolution? Certainly, because you give some amenities to the workers and then you tell them, okay, you're demanding too much and you need to shut the fuck up, while simultaneously you work to undermine all kinds of revolutionary politics. Everyone, dude, this is the other thing. You are so incredibly self-important. Like you think you're spitting here, and then you get like annoyed when I have fucking 25,000 people in the chat and I just move on. Okay? God damn, dude. This is what I mean. This is the denseness that I'm talking about. Jesus fucking Christ. Your experience in how to succeed in capitalist liberal media. You have no expertise in how to foment true political change. For Rosa, for Malcolm X, nearly all principal socialist political movers and theoreticians do not capitulate to liberal framing in the way you're talking about. Again, I really think you're overstating how common sense and well accepted your position actually is by leftists in any era. You are so oversimplifying the scope of leftist theory by saying, well, these communists could only do these things in the perfect situation for a revolution, and otherwise they should compromise their framing. I cannot think of a single person who has espoused that position and not been also an advocate for a capitalist mode of production. I'm not saying a variety of tactics is bad. I'm saying that, for instance, Nelson Mandela's capitulation to liberalism is one of the reasons the end of the apartheid was so insufficient in South Africa. The way he guaranteed property rights, the uselessness of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, these are all direct results of liberal capitulation. I'm not arguing for accelerationism law. What the fuck? I wasn't even responding to you. I think at that point I was responding to someone else. But you literally think I'm only talking to you. I understand that I'm inside of your living room right now, speaking to you from the TV or from your fucking computer monitor. But you have to remember that you're in a room, you're in a stadium full of people. So I already fucking moved on from your position. And I was actually talking about something that I think the video was actually talking about. Okay? But if you are so hyper individualistic that you can't comprehend that I'm probably not even addressing you, and you think I'm addressing you directly, how the fuck do you foresee a million other people like you building a fucking robust working class movement, a revolutionary working class movement? You can't even see the fact that you, bro, it's not that deep. You responded to my thing and I responded back. Sorry, lol. No, the deepness here is that you think I'm talking to you when I wasn't even talking to you. Okay? That's it. That's it. That's my the problem is you can't even imagine that I'm perhaps addressing something from the video and not you at that point. Let's continue.
Towards more demands, more equality in society.
Well, annoyingly, first I have to disagree with the framing in the first place. I can think either of those things, and like there can be these debates on the left on either of these things.
Right.
The reality is like you actually have to do one of those things for your thoughts to actually really matter.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Otherwise, we're just calling balls and strikes, which, you know, I like calling balls and strikes. There's probably great historical examples for either one. I think what makes America kind of peculiar is that like we have had no great revolutionary surges. The only ones that we like are close to it. I mean, there was the great strike waves like the 20s and 30s and stuff like that, but like usually those were fairly local things. I mean, even or statewide. And then like what 1968, which was just like kind of a well, it wasn't very revolutionary.
That's not very much. Yeah.
There, you know, but it's the sort of the closest in living memory. You could kind of make the case for either. But the reality is whatever's going to happen is going to happen unless you intervene to make it go a certain direction. And I don't see a great intervention coming from any kind of organized party that would be able to shift the tide. And so like, yeah, generally when people are deprived of very basic goods or basic political rights, they can gain a more revolutionary conscience, right? So like you see this in like the Philippines in like the during the EDSA revolution, is there'd been like an.
Why didn't you address anything the chatter said except for that one minor thing? Okay, I am going to respond to that chatter once again. That chatter is making a false comparison between the liberal capitulation after the dissolution of the apartheid with Nelson Mandela, a critique that I also agree with, in terms of not doing land distribution in the way that they were supposed to, for example. Okay? As far as adjusting it to a country that is incredibly hostile to even the bare minimum, a country where socialism is literally seen as an automatic pejorative, where people don't just say like Nancy Pelosi is bad and a demon. They say Nancy Pelosi is socialist, as in that branding in and of itself for the overwhelming majority of Americans is considered negative. That's a negative association. And a place where Americans are both, even in their most radical, still firmly a part of the labor aristocracy. And when they're not even a part of the labor aristocracy, they are just lumpen proles, fucking not even recognizing their class position, constantly fucking yelling at everything and at the mercy of reactionary sentiment. You have to readjust your commentary to that audience to try to get them to slowly but surely recognize who the villains of society are. And you can't do that by engaging with dense academic literature or behaving in a way where you're like, no, everyone understands that socialism is good across the fucking board. Okay? You have to get people to recognize their class position. You can't immediately assume that they will. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying that you shouldn't actually compromise on your worldview while doing so. Okay? That's it. This is a bit of... this is trying to explain to my chatters, you know, read the fucking room a little bit and be normal. Like, violence is a fundamental part of politics. Politics is about who gets to do violence, okay? And who doesn't get to do violence. That plays a formative role. Violence is an absolute necessity to keep the hierarchies in the way that they are as it stands. That's what police violence is. The state has a monopoly on it, and you are trained into not even seeing that as violence. You're trained to see it as an invisible form of violence. Or you have structural violence like poverty, okay? A great motivator for people to continue working at the widget factory day in, day out as their material conditions worsen, okay? As they make less than they previously thought they would. Having said that, in order for there to be any sort of revolution in this country, you have to get people to arrive at that position. And we are so far removed from that reality that I see no interest in fucking LARPing. That's it. You're LARPing at that point. And there are plenty of people who have done that. There have been plenty of wonderful communicators who have done that in the past, okay? And they have not been able to reach a level of success or prominence doing so. You know? That's it.
Insurgency, communist insurgency going there since the 1960s. But after 10 years of martial law, or more than 10 years of martial law, but like all these martial law, all these political rights being taken away, the economy is in the shitter, people revolted. But what they revolted for was for a liberal democracy, right? For a slight regime change. Yeah. And so, like, I think people tend to think like, okay, yes, if things get bad enough, people are going to take up guns and then kill all the fucking business owners or whatever, sure, right, and we're going to have these Soviets. Yes, but the reality is, like, anything like that happened, the Soviet Revolution, all the revolutions in Central Europe in the 1920, in the Chinese Revolution, these were preceded by decades of revolutionary struggle, real struggle, not like theoretical struggle. You know, we talk about this, we talk about that, like, you know, assassinations, murders, well, it's the same thing, but like, you know, going to the countryside and being organized in these large groups, right? And the fact is like there's no group in America that even comes close to being an organ that could affect whether things get better for workers or whether things get worse for workers. Right. I tend to think that, like, anything is possible basically under any circumstances.
Again, this is just Rosa Reformer Revolution thing. We can regulate our rhetoric. We can fight for reforms, but anti-capitalism and opposition to the bourgeois state must necessarily be a part of that too. To do otherwise is not just not as useful. It is fundamentally counterproductive. What the fuck is your main point of contention with me then? I don't understand. That is not my opinion. That's Rosa's opinion among many others. If you disagree with that, it's okay. I just think it's reasonable to trust her and similar writers. What is the fucking anger and resentment that you experience here then? Is it because you think I'm too much of a shepherd for the Democratic Party or something? I see that as a valuable platform to use to communicate a fucking message to a broader audience because that's the only fucking game in town, okay? Are you printing out pamphlets and handing it to fucking the local workers? Are you building a workers' council? Have you built a communist party? No. The fuck do you mean? What are you talking about? My main point of contention is that you think guys like the ones in this video are doing useful work when they're fundamentally counter-revolutionary, in my opinion. I'm not mad, Lamau. Bro, the person that you're considering to be counter-revolutionary is a fun conspiracy podcaster who I guess kind of has, is he Maoist? I don't know. Who literally fucking went and fought in Rojava, and then came back to the United States of America after fighting in Rojava against ISIS alongside Marxist Kurdish militias. And then he came back to the United States of America and worked in a fucking factory to literally build a fucking labor union at said beer factory that he was in. Like what more should he be doing? You know what I mean? I feel like he has done the praxis. He's done the praxis a lot more than I have, and a lot more than you have. And you're still chirping at him. Does that make it helpful, like that he's doing Ezra Klein talking points? He's not doing Ezra. Oh my God. Okay. All right, we're done. Once again, it is not his fault that you're misunderstanding his position, okay? I'm sorry. You are exactly the type of fucking leftist that I actually rail against with regular frequency, because not only do you have firmly held convictions, but you also lose the forest for the trees, okay, with regular frequency. Jesus
One
Christ.
thing that I've noticed that did gain people political consciousness was when I organized alongside coworkers, and people do become interested because people start thinking of themselves as workers. That's a big hurdle that a lot of people can't cross.
It's like when Chuck called Desmond Tutu a lib. Yeah, exactly.
Union density in the U.S. is like 11% right now.
Yeah, and 90% of our unions are fucking pig unions. I mean, like,
Right.
I don't mean that in like the sense like, oh, cop unions, like that. That's such a goofy argument.
This is a
I
different
mean,
thing.
like unions that like are reactionary unions that support the regime. That's just the fact of it. I don't think that they should
He's
be
right
replaced
about
by
that too.
no union, but like they're not revolutionary. They're not like left wing. It's just, I think a lot of people think of like unions as this like automatically left wing thing. It's just not the case.
In many cases, the members went for Bernie, and then the administration went for Biden or Elizabeth Warren or so-and-so.
Yeah,
And
they're political organs, right? And so like, obviously, like they are products of this capitalist system, and they very much resemble that. The fact of the matter is though, like people talk about like, oh, we need a revolution, we need a revolution, we need a revolution. I don't disagree, but most workers in America don't even have trade union consciousness, let alone revolutionary consciousness. They're not thinking of themselves as
I love that a guy who is definitely done more in terms of revolutionary action, okay, is being considered by this fucking chatter as a Ezra Klein style abundance lover, because he is just describing the reactionary tendencies of the average American laborer. Okay. Like, what the fuck? I mean, there is perhaps no better demonstration of how the internet left is so predisposed with the fucking aesthetics of things than this very moment, okay? It's fucking crazy.
as workers, let alone like these things. And I think that there's like a lot of like people try to run from that fact as fast as possible and be like, figure out which point, like, oh, this is why there isn't a revolution. This is why there isn't a revolution. This is why there isn't a revolution. And they get away from the fact that revolutionary communism, at least, not necessarily other kinds of revolutionary theory, it requires the proletariat being organized as a class and an alliance of other related classes. Everything else is kind of secondary. Like that's the most important thing. And that's also the toughest nut to crack.
class has come back in American society, right? So I'm 37. Most of my life I've been living, at the end of history, Francis Fukuyama's end of history. During the Cold War, the fascism is permanently discredited in the 1930s. USSR falls. 1989, it's going to be liberal democracy. This is the end of history, final form of human government. And class just receded as a way of understanding the world. That we didn't have big meta-narratives like bourgeoisie versus proletariat or whatever. But now we're kind of in this period, you were talking about liberal democracy before. it kind of seems like liberal democracy is breaking down, like very visibly. The democratic side of it is almost non-existent, and the liberal side of it is extremely exploitative. The markets are very unstable, the institutions are crumbling, and so the promises of liberal democracy to hold society together, as that wanes, people are then entertaining narratives that were previously unpopular. One of the ways of construing the story of history, how you got to where you are, is class struggle, which is, again, I think, becoming more and more popular. As people are experiencing worse and worse conditions, they're realizing that they're immiserated in their workplace. Like, well, you know, maybe I would actually stand to benefit if I organize with my coworkers.
I think one thing that just I have to stress is like, there is no revolutionary theory and there's no revolutionary party and there's going to be no revolution unless those things happen, right? There is class consciousness. That doesn't necessarily change anything, right? Like in and of itself, individual class consciousness that people gain and recognize themselves as workers. There has to be some degree of organization and organs where they can express that consciousness, right?
A party. Yes.
A party. Yeah, a party or something. I mean, yes, a party. I think I'm not interested in any of those like variations of the party form. I think they're fucking bullshit. And if they win, let me know, but they haven't. I think that's really the thing. And like people try to get around this in any kind of way. But like the reality is like there has to be an organized party for any sort of like class consciousness. I mean, there aren't even really organized trade unions that allow the expression of class consciousness as such. Like, I mean, in small ways, yes, but like not acting solely in the interests of the working class.
If there's a young person out there, let's say they're 15 or 16, and they've been bouncing around the political compass for the last few years, and they were in America First person, then they were a Nazbol, now they're an anarcho-collectivist, and then there's some type of, I don't know, esoteric monarchist bullshit. What would you say to that person having lived your beliefs in the real world, having organized in your workplace? You got into politics through, like, the real world, they got into it through the internet, but we all have to grow up at some point.
Yeah, that's
politics
the real world
happens
now.
to us.
Yeah.
Right? What advice would you give to that person?
I mean, I generally, well, actually that's not true. I dispense advice all the time. I think in general, if people really want to make politics an important part of their lives, and if they want to devote themselves to a cause in a real way where you can be of use to the world and to humanity, try to make sure your own house is in order internally in some way. Because I like you mentioned earlier, I do think that like a lot of the more negative tendencies of people who are into politics end up being just expressions of helplessness and of angst.
Yeah.
You know, we can't eliminate those things from our lives. Nobody can. Least of all, generally, like you know, working people. That's generally they have the hardest time eliminating those things. I would caution people, or I would suggest that people not view it like how I can use politics to like.
This Chatter's right. He's got the Margiela Gats on too. Brace. Fucking socialist, by the way.
Whatever.
With the goddamn Margiela Gats.
Like help my social life or like gain a friend group, but like how you can actually be of use to humanity and to the world and be of service to other people. That to me is like the only time that I've ever really felt like I was truly living what I believed in any kind of way, was when I was being of service and just as like a worker among workers, among other people. That's, I think, the main thing to realize. I mean, I understand it's probably somewhat hypocritical coming from me because I'm a sort of well-known left-wing personality. But the fact of the matter is like there's much more utility and use and frankly, if we're getting the anarchist way of thinking, spiritual fulfillment, doing the very basic like slog work of like, yeah, go organize your workplace, go like actually like interact with people in the real world. Don't be fucking weird. And don't press your beliefs on other people because at the end of the day, like you are fringe. The things that you believe in, a lot of people do not believe in them. And they don't believe in them because of whatever, propaganda, whatever. That doesn't matter. They don't believe in them.
Right.
And the way that you do get people on your side is that like you show them that like the things that you believe in are actually like the things that make the most sense. And like if you want to convince them of that, you have to make sense to yourself and society. So like, yeah, like don't be the fucking like freak in the corner at work on your fucking phone, like fucking Discord chat or whatever. I don't know what these people do. But I think like experience, you know, it breeds a certain maturity and like a certain like you know, assuredness that you'll feel and that other people will notice, that like working people are attracted to. I think there's a lot of fetishization of weakness on the left, and of being like a kind of rebel and yeah, I'm a fucking, you know, like punk kind of shit. And that's the world I came from. Like that is actually like that is not what you want to do as a political person. You actually want to be a member of society.
You don't want your organization or your political party to be weak.
No.
You want power.
You want to be strong. You want to take actually ultimate power and change the world in an irreversible way.
Right.
And these people do
Take notes. What do you mean? This is literally what I believe and what I advocate for all the fucking time. He's just using more words to basically say be normal and organize. And that is the only way you will recognize the power that you hold when you are united with others under equal circumstances. That's what do I always tell people? This is literally what I was yelling about for the past fucking hour. Not only is Brace my friend, but we are in alignment on this. It's also ironically what I talked about. It's ironically what I talked about in the Chicago identity politics, but in the Chicago speech and also in the speech that I gave at Oxford. I think like optics to a certain degree do matter, especially when our job is to be persuasive communicators, right? And in a lot of circumstances, in spite of my best attempts, as I've talked about already, in spite of my best attempts, and for the record, I'm not even saying like it doesn't hit like you think it does when you say just be normal. Like what the fuck does that even mean? It means don't succumb to your fucking idiotic tendencies of trying to come across like the best intellectual, okay? Or to maintain some sort of like silly purity in your mind when you are communicating with people, okay? Sometimes that means not even talking about politics at all. Sometimes that means baking in your political worldview into everyday events. It's the easiest fucking way to communicate this. Chatter's Mac is you're more normal than Brace. I mean, Brace is pretty fucking abnormal when he wants to be, just like I am as well. But he also very normal when he wants to be too.
not like you have to act like that and you have to think like that. And as part of that, it's like you have to actually become a member of society. Never like you can't think of people like fuck these normies or whatever. Like you can never ever. We love normal people.
Yeah. Most people who work, fuck those guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like and just you know, it's not a subculture. Like this is, you know, these political, well, some of these are subcultures, but like socialist politics have transformed the world over the years. Millions and millions and millions of people have believed in them, have fought for them, have died for them. And I think that people do a disservice by pretending it's just like it's like a being like straight edge or being whatever. It's a club to be weird in. And not saying that you can't be like a weird person. You probably are if you're into politics to some extent. I'm not saying that I'm the most normal guy in the world.
Amber has a great phrase where she says, beware of people who come to the movement without friends. Yes. That they're coming for a social group.
Yeah.
And, you know, admittedly, for any organization, there's going to be get-togethers, there's going to be happy hours or drinks and times to socialize and whatever, but a lot of people just come to it for that.
Yeah.
They don't come to it for the stuff, they don't come to it for the organization or the struggle.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because that's like a musical subculture, right? And I think of people who, they're members of organizations, but then they also have friends who have like totally different lives and maybe don't share their political beliefs. And yeah, I've been an artist, right, my whole adult life. I've had this kind of creative peer group where I'm into this other stuff. I have a cultural identity. I don't need a cultural identity from politics.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna be able to go to the dentist unless I get some fucking redistribution and some policies.
Yeah.
You know, I need the stuff from politics. My cultural identity is over here. I like certain films. I like going to art stuff. You know, I make things that hang on walls and galleries.
Yeah.
That doesn't give me a doctor's appointment. It doesn't give me anything else that I need. It doesn't build roads and bridges and create jobs and reshore industry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I need politics for that.
Yeah, I think that like it's important to not just come from a place of like complete resentment and hatred, but from a place of genuinely like, I love humanity. You know, I love progress. I love to make. I want to make the world a beautiful place to live in. And I think that like the way that society is structured, what you're saying right then, like about people coming to, or what Amber said about people coming to politics with no friends. I agree with that, but I also,
this person feels called out. That's why they think it's insufferable.
like the way that society is structured is a lot of people don't have friends. They might have had friends like 30 years ago,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's up to people to like actually, you know, try to be there for other people and try to make other people and yourself into like a human being that can like withstand the weird social pressures and like psychic assaults that we're constantly under in our society and emerge as like a bastion of like humanity and normalcy that is also disciplined and organized enough to destroy the United States government.
Wrong.
Brace, thank you so much. You're
To destroy the United States government. Great way to end that. That was Brace Belden talking to Joshua.